If I said the words to you shaken, not stirred, you would probably know exactly what cocktail I was talking about. And of course, that's a martini. But you might not know exactly what those directions mean and why they're significant, and how they might change the actual cocktail itself, and ultimately your enjoyment of it. So the martini is a cocktail that doesn't have, it's actually one of very few classic cocktails that doesn't have a very traceable origin or story. Many different bartenders, many different places would like to claim it as their own, but no one really knows for sure, although there are some more repetitive theories. We won't get into that. What's most important now is that you understand where the cocktail kind of developed from and how to make it perfectly. So the cocktail, the martini cocktail, developed during Prohibition times when one of the very few spirits people had to drink was bathtub gin, which was ultimately moonshine with juniper berry extract added to it. It was a very high in alcohol, harsh spirit to consume. So a lot of people realized that if they added something called dry vermouth to the gin and chilled it well, that it was extremely smooth and very drinkable. And dry vermouth is a fortified wine, so it's a watered down wine with a spirit added to it to preserve it. So it's a little bit sweet and a little bit dry and already diluted as it is. So when you add that to the gin, it just softens the entire drink and it makes it less hot. So one thing I know after bartending for many years is that most classic bartenders have a standard way of making a martini, and that is what I'm going to show you today. So firstly, of course, every martini is always made with gin, never vodka, never anything else. All martinis have a good amount of dry vermouth in them. It's just as important to the cocktail as the gin itself. So the way a classic bartender makes a martini is with 2 ounces of gin to 1 ounce of dry vermouth, and that's what we're going to learn today. Martini is almost always served up. Classically, it's served up, which means that it's served chilled in a glass without ice. We're going to use a martini glass, and before we begin making the cocktail, the first thing we always do is chill the glass. So I'll add ice to the martini glass, along with a little bit of water to speed up the process. While that chills, we'll make the cocktail. So using my mixing glass and my jigger, I'm going to add 2 ounces of London Dry gin, to 1 ounce of dry vermouth to my mixing glass. Measuring is an extremely important part of making a balanced cocktail. It's almost impossible to do it without having a jigger on hand. The next thing I'll do is add ice. I never add ice until the spirits are combined in the glass. Otherwise, it'll start diluting before I'm ready for it to. And I'm generous with the ice that I use. And next I use my cocktail spoon. A classic martini is always stirred. The cocktail that James Bond is referring to is actually called a Vesper, which is a variation on the classic martini that includes another fortified wine called Lillet and a little maraschino liqueur, and that is typically shaken. And that's really one of very few variations on a martini that are shaken. Always, when we're working with just spirits like dry vermouth and gin, we only stir because it doesn't bruise the spirit. It keeps it clear and it looks prettier when presented, and it doesn't over dilute. So while I'm stirring this, what I am doing is diluting the spirit. And I want to move quickly with bigger ice cubes like I have here. I'll be stirring for a little bit longer. If you have smaller ice cubes, it won't take as much time to dilute and chill the drink properly. But ultimately, what you're looking for on the mixing glass is a little frost on the outside. And the more often you make these, the more quickly you'll recognize exactly the moment when the martini is ready. And we're almost there. It's a drink that can't be rushed. So if you're working with really great ice cubes that are very big and take a little while to melt down, the stirring can take some time, and it's worth the wait. This is just about ready, so I'll stop stirring, and I'll dump out my chilled martini glass to shake out any excess water. Remove the bar spoon. I'm going to use my popcorn strainer to strain the martini into the glass. You have to pour carefully because a martini glass spills very easily. You want to make sure that there are no chips of ice or any traces of ice in the martini itself. Typical martini or traditional martini is always garnished with either an olive or a lemon twist. More often than not, it's with one single olive, and it's important to have a good quality olive for that as well. So that's what I'll use today. A classic martini is actually a really simple drink, and there's no other drink that can be called a martini besides this. 2 ounces of gin, 1 ounce of dry vermouth, chilled, served up in a glass with one single garnish. A lot of people overuse the term, and in fact, oftentimes muddy the classic cocktail by adding something like blue cheese stuffed olives or extra olive juice or using vodka. And if you like it, you should drink it. But that's not a martini. And I encourage you the next time you're at a bar to have it this way, to ask your bartender to make you a martini and let them do it the way it should be done. Gin is a really beautiful spirit now. We're no longer drinking moonshine with juniper berry extract added to it. It's become very complex with many layers of herbs and botanicals that make it a beautiful cocktail just by itself. So I encourage you to try it when you have a chance. And if you ever do want to make one at home, just remember to have the right tools and to take your time and to give a little care to the drink. Any of these classic cocktails hold a rich history, and they come from times that have been almost forgotten for us. So cheers to you, and enjoy your martini the next time you have one. Thank you.